Captain Henry Morgan was the son of a rich Welsh farmer. At a young age, Henry had no inclination to the calling of his father and decided to leave his country for an adventurous career at sea. When arrived at the seacoast, he found several ships at anchor bound for Barbados, an island which is located at the most eastern part of the Caribbean. As soon as he came ashore at the island, he was sold as a slave by the crew members of the ship. He served his time at Barbados and, obtaining his liberty, betook himself to Jamaica to seek new fortunes. Here he found two vessels of pirates ready to go to sea, and being destitute of employment, he went with them, with the intent to follow the exercises of that sort of people, and soon learned their manner of living so exactly that, having performed 4 voyages with profit and success, he agreed with some of his comrades who got money by the same voyages to join stocks and buy a ship. The vessel being bought, they anonymously chose him captain and commander. With this ship he set forth from Jamaica to cruise on the coasts of Campeche, in which voyage he took several ships, with which he returned triumphant. Here he found an old Dutch pirate named Edward Mansveld, busied in equipping a considerable fleet with aim to land on the continent and pillage whatever he could. Mansveld, seeing Captain Morgan return with so many prizes, judged him to be a man of courage and chose him for his vice admiral in that expedition. Thus, having fitted out 15 ships, great and small, they sailed from Jamaica with 500 men, Walloons and French. This fleet arrived not long after at the Isle of St. Catherine, near the continent of Costa Rica, 35 leagues from the river Chagre. Here they made their first descent, landing most of their men, who soon forced the garrison that kept the island to surrender all the forts and castles thereof, which they instantly demolished. Except one, wherein they placed 100 men of their own party, and all the slaves they had taken from the Spaniards. With the rest of their men, they marched to another small island, so near to St. Catherine's that with a bridge they made it in a few days. They passed thither, taking with them all the ordnance they had taken on the great island. Having ruined with fire and sword both the islands, and leaving necessary orders at the castle, they put to sea again, with their Spanish prisoners. Yet, these they set ashore not long after on the firm land near Puerto Velo. Then they cruised on Costa Rica till they came to the river Cola. There they pillaged all the towns in those parts, thence to pass to the village of Nara to do the same. The Spanish governor of Panama, on advice of their arrival and of the hostilities they committed, thought it his duty to meet them with a body of men. His coming caused the pirates to retire suddenly, seeing the whole country was alarmed and that their signs were known. Hereupon, the pirates returned to St. Catherine's to visit the 100 men they left in garrison there. The governor of these men was a Frenchman named L'Sieur Simon. L'Sieur Simon put the great island in a very good posture of defense, and the little one he had caused to be cultivated with many fertile plantations, sufficient to revictual the whole fleet, not only for the present, but also for the new voyage. Mansveld was very much bent to keep the 2 islands in perpetual position, being very commodiously situated for the pirates, being so near the Spanish dominions and easily defended. Hereupon, Mansveld determined to return to Jamaica to send recruits to St. Catherine's, that in case of an invasion the pirates might be provided for a defense. As soon as he arrived, he propounded his intentions to the governor there, who rejected his propositions, fearing to displease his master the King of England. Besides that, giving him the man he desired and necessaries, he must of necessity diminish the forces of that land whereof he was governor. Hereupon, Mansveld, knowing that of himself he could not compass his designs, he went to Tortuga. But there, before he could put in execution what was intended, death surprised him and put a period to his life. On July 24, Don John, the commander-in-chief of the Spanish Armada, set sail with a fair wind. He called before him all his people and made them a speech, encouraging them to fight against the enemies of their country and religion, and especially against those inhuman pirates who had committed so many horrid cruelties upon the subjects of the Catholic king, withal promising everyone rewards, especially to those that behaved themselves well in service of the king and their country. Thus, Don John bid them farewell, and the ship set sail under a favorable gale. When they arrived at Cartagena, they presented a letter to the governor, and seeing their resolution to be comfortable to his desires, he promised them his assistance, with 1 frigate, 1 galleon, 1 boat, and 126 men, 1/2 out of his own garrison, and the other half muletos. Thus, being well provided with necessaries, they left the port of Cartagena on August 2, and on the 10th they arrived in sight of St. Catherine's towards the western point thereof. And though the wind was contrary, having lost one of their boats by foul weather at the rock called Quiraceños, the pirates, seeing the Spanish ships come to an anchor, gave them presently 3 guns with bullets, which were soon answered in the same coin. Hereupon, Major Joseph Sanchez Ximenez sent ashore to the pirates one of his officers to require them, in the name of the Catholic king, to surrender the island, seeing they had taken it in the midst of peace between the 2 crowns of Spain and England, and that if they would be obstinate, he would certainly put them all to the sword. The pirates made answer that the island had once before belonged unto the government and the dominions of the King of England, and that instead of surrendering it, they preferred to lose their lives. On Friday the 13th, the Spanish admiral received intelligence that all the pirates upon the island were only 72 in number, and that the pirates were under a great consternation, seeing such considerable forces come against them. With this intelligence, the Spaniards resolved to land and advanced towards the fortress. On Sunday the 15th, the Spaniards began to advance and march towards the gate called Cortadura. They made 3 attacks on 3 several sides and at one at the same time, wherein they fought on both sides very desperately with great courage, till the pirates, seeing many of their men already killed, and that they could in no manner subsist any longer, retreated towards Cortadura, where they surrendered themselves, and the whole island was in Spanish hands. The Spaniards found on the island 800 pounds of powder, 250 pounds of small bullets, with many other military provisions. Among the prisoners were taken also 2 Spaniards who had bore arms under the English against the Spanish. These were shot to death the next day. The 10th day of September, an English vessel arrived at the isle, which being seen at a great distance by a Spanish major. He ordered Lucius Simon, who was a Frenchman, to go and visit the ship and to tell them that the island belonged still to the English. He performed the command and found in the ship only 40 men, 1 woman and her daughter, who were all instantly made prisoners. The English pirates were all transported to Puerto Velo, except by 3, who by order of the governor were carried to Panama, there to work in the castle of St. Jerome. Captain Morgan, seeing that his predecessor Admiral Mansfield was dead, used all the means that were possible to keep in position the Isle of St. Catherine. Seated near Cuba, his chief intent was to make it a refuge and sanctuary to the pirates of those parts, putting it in a condition of being a convenient receptacle of their preys and robberies. To this effect, he left no stone unmoved, writing to several merchants in Virginia and New England, persuading them to send him provisions and necessaries towards putting the island in such a posture of defense as to fear no danger of an invasion from any side. But all this proved ineffectual by the Spaniards retaking the island. Yet, Captain Morgan retained his courage, which put him on new designs. First, he equipped a ship in order to gather a fleet as great and strong as he could. By degrees he effected it, and gave orders to every member of his fleet to meet at a certain port of Cuba, there determining to call a council and deliberate what was best to be done, and what place first to fall upon. Captain Morgan had now been 2 months in the ports of the south of Cuba, when he had got together a fleet of 12 sail, between ships and great boats, with 700 fighting men, part English and part French. They called a council. Some advised an assault on the city of Havana in the night, which they said might easily be done. Others propounded, according to their several opinions, other attempts. But the former proposal was rejected, because many of the pirates who had been prisoners at other times in the city of Havana affirmed nothing of consequence could be done with less than 1,500 men. Finally, they saw no possibility of gathering so great a fleet, and hereupon, with what they had, they concluded to attempt some other place. Among the rest, one propounded they should assault the town of El Puerto del Principe. This proposition he proceeded to by saying he knew the place very well, and that being at a distance from the sea, it never was sacked by any pirate. This proposal was presently admitted by Captain Morgan and the chief of his companions. Hereupon, they ordered every captain to weigh anchor and set sail, steering towards the coast nearest to El Puerto del Principe. Being arrived at a bay in El Puerto del Principe, a Spaniard who was prisoner aboard the fleet swam ashore by night to the town of El Puerto del Principe, warning the inhabitants that the pirates were coming. The Spaniards, upon this advice, began to hide their riches and carry away their movables. The governor immediately raised all the people of the town, free men and slaves, and with part of them took a post of which of necessity the pirates must pass, and commanded many trees to be cut down and laid them across the ways to hinder their passage. Placing several ambuscades strengthened with some pieces of cannon to play upon them on their march. He gathered all about 800 men, of which detaching part into the ambuscades. With the rest he circled the town, drawing them up in a spacious field, from where they could see the coming of the pirates at length. Captain Morgan, with his men now on the march, found the avenues to the town unpassable. Hereupon they took their way through the wood, traversing it with great difficulty. At last they came to the plain, from its figure called by the Spaniards La Savane, or the sheet. The governor, seeing them come, detached a troop of horses to charge them in the front. Thinking to disperse them and to pursue them with his main body, but this didn't succeed, for the pirates marched in a very good order, at the sound of their drums, and with flying colors, coming near the horses, and they drew them into a semicircle, and so advanced towards the Spaniards, who charged them valiantly for a while. But the pirates, being very dexterous at their arms, and their governor, with many of their companions being killed, retreated towards the wood to have an advantage, but before they could reach it, most of them were killed by the pirates. Thus, they left the victory to the enemies, who had no considerable loss of men in the battle, except for a few wounded. The skirmish lasted 4 hours. They entered the town not without great resistance of the inhabitants, who defended themselves as long as possible, and many, seeing the enemy in the town, shut themselves up in their own houses, and made several shots upon the pirates, who thereupon threatened them, saying,
"If you surrender not voluntarily, you shall soon see the towns in flames, and your wives and children torn to pieces before your faces."
Upon these menaces, the Spaniards submitted to the pirates, believing they could not continue their fight any longer. As soon as the pirates had possessed themselves of the town, they enclosed all the Spaniards, men, women, children, and slaves in several churches, and pillaged all the goods they could find. They then searched the country round about, bringing in daily many goods and prisoners, with much provision. With this they fell to making great cheer, after their old custom, without remembering the poor prisoners, whom they let to starve in the churches. They tortured them daily and inhumanely to make them confess where they had hid their goods and money, and little or nothing was left for them, not sparing the women and little children, giving them nothing to eat, whereby the greatest part perished. Provisions growing scarce, they thought it convenient to depart and seek new fortunes in other places. They told the prisoners they should find money to ransom themselves, else they should be all transported to Jamaica, and besides, if they did not pay a second ransom for the town, they would turn every house into ashes. The Spaniards hereupon nominated amongst themselves 4 fellow prisoners to go and seek for the contributions. But the pirates, to the intent that they should return speedily with those ransoms, tormented several cruelly in their presence before they departed. After a few days, the Spaniards returned telling Captain Morgan, "We have run up and down and searched all the neighboring woods and places we most suspected, and yet have not been able to find any of our own party, nor consequently any fruit of our embassy. But if you are pleased to have a little longer patience with us, we shall certainly cause all that you demand to be paid within 50 days. Which Captain Morgan granted. But not long after, there came into the town 7 or 8 pirates who had been ranging in the woods and fields, and got considerable booty. These brought amongst other prisoners a man whom they had taken with letters. Captain Morgan, having perused them, found that they were from the governor of Santa Jago, being written to some of the prisoners, wherein he told them they should not make too much haste to pay any ransom for their town or persons, or any other pretext, but on the contrary, they should put off the pirates as well as they could with excuses and delays, expecting to be relieved by him in a short time, when he would certainly come to their aid. Upon this intelligence, Captain Morgan immediately ordered all the plunder to be carried aboard, and withal, he told the Spaniards that the very next day they should pay their ransoms, for he would not wait a moment longer, but to reduce the whole town to ashes if they failed to give him the sum that he demanded. With this intimation, Captain Morgan made no mention to the Spaniards of the letters he intercepted. They answered that it was impossible for them to give such a sum of money in so short a space of time, seeing their fellow townsmen were not to be found in all the country thereabouts. Captain Morgan knew full well their intentions, but thought it not convenient to stay there any longer, demanding of them only 500 oxen or cows, with sufficient salt to powder them, with this condition that they should carry them on board his ships. Thus, he departed with all his men, taking with him only 6 of the principal prisoners as pledges. Next day, the Spaniards brought the cattle and salt to the ships, and required the prisoners. But Captain Morgan refused to deliver them, till they had helped his men to kill and salt the beefs. This was performed in great haste, for he didn't want to stay there any longer, lest he should be surprised by the forces that were gathering against him. Having received all the provisions aboard his vessels, he finally set the prisoners free.
What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Early in the morning, hooray, and up she rises, hooray, and up she rises, hooray, and up she rises, early in the morning.
Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to be notified about our latest videos.